Hello, everyone. You are welcome to another SQL session. Okay, so in this session, we would be talking about constraints. Okay, so we have already started that flow on the check constraint, right? And we talked about the check constraint being able to kind of place a cap, more like this should be the minimum, this should be the maximum, the values coming in shouldn't be greater than these, or it should be less than these, or it should be equal to these. Okay, so you're using it operates more with the Boolean data type. Okay, so it's more like if it does not meet the conditions, if it is not true, then disregard the values that are coming in. Okay, so if it is true, then accept the values. All right, so now we have seen this as a way of putting this in our definition, right? Let us see another way. I recall talking about the different ways of placing the primary key. So the primary key could be defined here. We could also place it here, right? So we could say primary key here, right? And that would mean us removing this from here, and it will still work properly. Okay, just the way we have the not nulls happening on one line and default. All right, so this is how you could also make the check constraints happen on one line. So I would just do this quickly. First of all, let me drop this table so that the effect could be demonstrated. So I would do drop table products and boiler. It's done. All right. Now let us remove this, and I will just cut these and paste it here. Okay, so this is all right. So I'm putting it in one line, so I've scraped off the other um, elements of the definition which aren't necessary because now it's joined to the column. Okay, I could also make multiple of these. So I could put another check constraint. Let's place a price, and the price is going to be integer, or let's make price decimal. Okay, let's do this decimal 10 to, I know this is another data type that I've not introduced, and then I would put check. So I would soon explain the decimal because it could be um could the decimal data type sometimes could be misleading to someone who is just trying to use it for the first time. So I would have to throw a little more light on that. So let's say we are saying, let's assume that the price should not be more than zero. So what I'm just trying to show us here is that the check constraints could be placed on multiple columns. Okay, so just the way other constraints are. Okay, so every constraint could be placed on multiple columns. All right, so that means you could have more than one columns having those constraints, except the primary key. Okay, except the primary key. So the primary key has to be in one column, and that is, I believe that is why we have something like the unique key, which has a kind of semblance with the primary key. All right. So all right, so I think we are done with this definition, and we could run this. So it is done, and let us insert some values quickly into this table. So I would say insert into the name of the table is product. Okay, and I put in my columns. So what do I have? I would escape ID because it is serial that's going to be automated. So product name, quantity, and price. All right, so let me just do this on another line, values, and let's insert some values. Let's assume we want to buy a chair and we want to buy 10 of it, and the price should be 5,000. And let's add another, and this is going to be, say, the table, and we need 5 tables, and Okay. Okay, I'll show us that. We need five tables, and the table should be, um, say, same price. Okay. Let me just make it a bit higher. All right, and enter. Yes, definitely we are going to have an error. You know why? Let's see why. Product violate check constraints, the product quantity check. All right. So because we have quantity here that should be greater than 10, that is why we have issues even on both angles. So this is meant to be at least 11. All right. And this is meant to be maybe, let's let's just put any number greater than 10, and then it should work. All right. So when we check our table, we would see all those items, and we are seeing that the ID is this, the quantity is this, the price is this. Okay. Let me show you something about the decimal. So let's talk about the decimal. Okay. So I would do this decimal. Now, I don't need to really explain the meaning of decimal, okay? Because it's, if you are from the programming part of things, you realize that decimal is still what we call float, and it's kind of more relatable knowing it as decimal, because everyone that has touched a bit of mathematics from the basics will understand what decimal is. So you have things like 34.5, and the rest. Okay, so now when we're talking about the decimal type, what I used was decimal, and I did 10 comma 2. Okay, and when I inserted the values, I did insert a value, and a value of 5,000, right? But the output, this was the output. Okay, so let me call this input. Okay, this was the input, and the output was 5,000.00. Okay, and that's because I had declared that this should be 2. So what it means is that if I have 2 here, it says that whatever is after the decimal point should not be more than 2 values. So even though I don't put any value, it will give me 2 zeros after the decimal point. All right. So if I make this 4, then that means I should expect 4 zeros. Okay. So that's what that's what this means. All right. Now let's talk about this part. By by uh, by mere looking at it for the first time, I know what could be going through your mind, because you would have probably answered the question, what is so special about this? Because you would probably be thinking that what this means is that if we have 2 on the right side, then this should be having 10 values on the left side. Yes, you might have the answer, but that's more like 50%, because you only got this part. But in terms of this part, it's wrong, because when you see this part here, declaring this part is saying that the combination of both the left part and the right part should be this. Okay, so when we have something like, when we say 10, okay, and we have 2, you are saying that um, for this 10, what this 10 means is that the counts of values, okay, both on the right plus left, let me maximize this, both on the right plus left should be 10. Then this 2 means that the values, or the count of values after the decimal, okay, or let me just make it align. The count of values on the right should be 2. All right. So should be, I wouldn't say should be 10 exactly. So I should say should be less than, let me, should be less than or equal to 10. And this should be equal to 2. Okay. Let's do. So this should be equal to 2, but this should be less than or equal to 10. Okay, so that means if I have something like decimal and I have 5, 2, what is expected? If I do an input, if I do an input of, say, maybe my input is, say, 5,000. Okay, you know that the output is meant to come out as 5,000.00. If you check this, you realize that it will give me an error. So based on this, the system will throw an error. Even though 5,000 is just one, two, three, four, right? But when you add these two zeros, it makes it one, two, three, four, five, six. But I said that the combination of both the left and right should be 5. So it has violated what I defined here. So it will give me an error. So you have to be careful when you are declaring this. So when you are putting this value on the left side, you are not just putting it to cater for values on the left side, all right? You are putting it to represent values on both sides, all right? So it represents both sides of the value. So, all right, so now we can, knowing this is enough, so we could continue with our queries. Okay, so now we have done these constraints, right? And we realize that we put the constraints, the check constraints on both columns, the quantity and the price. So let's try seeing what is going to happen. We've seen the effect when we put the quantity, the wrong quantity, right? So what is going to happen if we put the wrong price? It's going to give us an error, right? So if we put something like, say, 4,000, it should work, right? So that is, so when we run this table, we'll see it here, okay, that it is working. All right. So that's all right. Now let us continue. Let's go to our table. Let's go to let's check out this table. Okay, so we did a table of student registration because right now I would like to explain another part of another effect of constraints, which we have done. Okay, but I want to show you how we could, apply the check constraints on an already existing table. Okay, so when we want to apply, say you want to apply the check constraints, so you want to apply the check constraint on our an already existing table. We Let me do this. So applying check constraint on an existing table. So if we want to do that, all we just need to do is alter. Remember the DDL command, right? So we'll say alter table, and in our case, the table's name is, we want to use our student registration table, all right? And then we could say, what are we altering the table? What table are we altering? Or what column do you want to alter? But first of all, what do you want to do in terms of altering the table? We want to add constraints. We want to add constraints, and then we are going to create a constraint name. So I would call this check age because I want to apply the constraint on the age column. Then I would put in my condition for it to check. So I want it to check that the age should be um, less than or equal to 17, and the age, so I'm putting multiple conditions, should be greater than or equal to, say, 51 or 50. Okay, so let's assume that this academy does not want to admit persons who are lower than 17 years and above 50 years old. Okay, so let us take this and so let us take these and apply it here, SQL, and do this, and we run. Okay, so I have an error here. So what's the error saying? Check constraint, check age of relation is violated by some rule. Oh, okay. So what this means is that there are possibilities of some rows already existing in the table that has ages probably lower than 17, or yeah, it's probably lower than 17 and above 50. Okay, so that is under effect of the check constraint. So if your table already has that, because remember what I talked about constraint is to enforce rules so that it will promote data integrity. So you wouldn't expect that your table is already violating those rules, and then you just come in to be smart. You place some constraints and expect that the constraints will just start working for values that comes after what you have placed on the table. No, no, that's not how it works. Okay, because it's trying to promote data integrity. So it will tell you that these constraints already has values that are violating it on your table, so it's not going to work. The constraint will not take effect. So it's best you just put in values that it's best to just put in values that are not um, violating. Okay, so what I could do is I would have to let I think we could just raise the bar up and say it should not be less than or equal to maybe 20. Okay. um okay, no, we have to reduce it, so it should be less than or equal to, we could say 15. I'm not sure there's any of those registrations that is less than 15. Then maybe the age, we could say it can be greater than probably 60. I just want to show that it could come into effect. So when I run this, it still tells me that there are some rows that are being violated. Okay, so let's just check. Let's just check the table and say select all from student registration. So we could just know what to put as our maximum and minimum. Okay, so let me just put up this. All right, now we have the age here. We have 29, we have 17. Okay, we have 17 here. And what else? We have 15. We have 15 as the lowest age. So what was our command? Okay, I believe the error is from how we declared it. All right, so it should be age should be, because when we say it should be less than or equal to 15, then we are trying to say that it's conflicting. So what we are saying is that the ages should be less than or equal to 15, and we are still saying the ages should be greater than or equal to. So we should say age should be greater than or equal to 15. Okay, and we could say that it should be less than or equal to 60. All right, so this should be able to accommodate the other values that are here. All right, so if we have let us see if we have age is greater than or equal to 15. um let's just make, let's make, okay, so when we run this, it works. Okay, so now we would try to insert values that would maybe go against that rule. So let us see, which columns are many. I need to look for the inserts, the inserts. Yeah, so let me use this insert. Let me just, okay, let me use the insert command for the seed data, and I should quickly paste it here. And then let's assume, first of all, we are going to have an issue here because we made this part to be unique, so it would detect that this email already exists. Then is there any other part that could, that's okay, I think that was the only part we made unique. And then so the age, so we said the age should be greater than or equal to 15. So that means if we make this 14 and we run this, it's going to give me an issue. New role for relation violates check constraint. Okay, so it will only work if I make this within the range of what I declared. So if I do this to be 20 and I run it, it works. Okay, now let us let us try something else. So even though we could, just the way we could add other things, okay, like add columns, we and drop columns. So as we could also add, as we can add constraints, we could also drop constraints. Okay, so if I do this and I say student registration and I say what do I want to do? I want to drop constraint, and the constraint I want to drop is I will just put the name, which is check age constraint. Okay, and I that is all. Okay, so when I run this, it tells me done. All right, so if I bring in these values again, okay, let me just copy this. If I bring these values again and I decide to put my age to be 14, okay, remember it gave us an error then, so don't forget I need to change this because by now it would have recorded as a unique email. So 14 was by the previous check conditions or constraint not expected to be there. It was a violation, but now it is not because I have removed constraint. So you can see it works. And so if I rerun this table, I press select all, I would check my age column and I will see that I have 17, 51, and I have 14. All right. So that is simply everything that we need to understand about the check constraint. So, in this session, we have discussed extensively about constraints, and we've added check constraints. And then okay, so we've talked about the decimal type, and we've seen what the hacks of understanding the decimal data type, right? And then we've seen that we could add constraints to multiple columns of the table, and we could alter, we could also apply check constraints to an existing table, and we could also drop it just the way we added the check constraint. So this would be to drop, we would just do drop, okay, and we would remove this check part. Okay, so this was meant to be greater than or equal to, and this was meant to be less than or equal to. So yes, so this is the code to drop, and this is the one to add. All right, so that will be all on constraints, and we have understood the different constraints. So we've had not null, we've had primary key, Okay, we've had unique, we've had we've also had we've done check, defaults. So I believe this is what we have covered so far in terms of constraints. So we'll be talking about more of this in the subsequent sessions. Thank you very much.